Bienvenue.
Good morning and welcome to the 23rd meeting of the Standing Committee on Official Languages. We're Thursday, May 8th, 2014. We are here pursuant to Standing Order 81-4 to study the main estimates 2014-2015. We have with us this morning the Commissioner of Official Languages, Mr. Fraser. He is accompanied by Ms. Sekali and Madame Lagacé. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Fraser, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Bonjour. It is a pleasure to appear before you today to present the main estimates of the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages. Pour accomplir son mandat, le Commissariat aux langues officielles.
The Office of the Commissioner has a budget of $20.8 million to carry out its mandate during the 2014-2015 fiscal year. This amount includes $13 million in salaries, or 62.8% of the main estimates. Our workforce consists of 170 full-time equivalents. Our operations are divided into three program activities: protection of Canadians' language rights, the promotion of linguistic duality, and internal services. Before we examine these activities in detail, a word about our recent move is in order.
All of our employees in the National Capital Region to new offices at 30 Victoria Street in Gatineau. The decision to move from our downtown Ottawa location was made about a year ago for the following reasons. First, to foster cooperation and share common services with other agents of Parliament already located at 30 Victoria Street, notably the Chief Electoral Officer, Privacy Commissioner, and Information Commissioner. To embrace the new work environment known in the public service as Workplace 2.0, which is more conducive to collaboration between employees, and to take advantage of lower rental costs resulting from a smaller office footprint, which in total represents about $800,000 in annual savings for my office for the taxpayer. An advance against future appropriations was provided to fund the costs associated with the Office of the Commissioner's move in 2013-14. Pour protéger les droits linguistiques de la population.
To protect the language rights of Canadians, the Office of the Commissioner investigates and resolves complaints, conducts audits, evaluates the performance of federal institutions, and intervenes before the courts when appropriate. The expenditures planned for this activity in 2014-2015 are $6.8 million, which amounts to 32.8% of the total budget. Over the current fiscal year, my office will carry out audits of the Canada Border Services Agency, the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, Elections Canada, and the Treasury Board Secretariat. In addition, we will begin an audit of the Canada School of Public Service. We will publish follow-ups to our audits of Air Canada and Industry Canada, and we will begin a follow-up to our audit of Parks Canada.
Courts on behalf of Canadians. For example, we are currently awaiting a Supreme Court ruling in the Thibodeau versus Air Canada case, and the case against CBC Radio-Canada is still active. In total, more than 400 admissible complaints are filed with my office every year. We will continue our ongoing efforts to reduce the length of our investigations. Recent efforts to improve our investigation process have included the launch of a web complaint form and a client satisfaction survey. Les dépenses liées à la promotion de la...
Expenditures linked to the promotion of linguistic duality account for $6.5 million, a sum that represents 31.5% of the total budget. To promote Canadian linguistic duality, the Office of the Commissioner communicates regularly with parliamentarians, official language minority communities, federal institutions, and the Canadian public. Our research our studies, our distribution of information products, and our exchanges with many key stakeholders and community representatives contribute to the promotion of linguistic duality among Canadians, which is an integral part of my mandate. Among our many planning activities, we will continue to work with federal institutions and organizing committees to help them integrate linguistic duality into the various activities leading up to the celebration of the 150th anniversary of Confederation in 2017. Canada's official languages are an important part of the country's history and a key component of its future.
And official language minority communities, as well as early childhood issues. In both cases, we will collaborate with governmental and community organizations already at work in these domains. We will intervene with federal institutions to follow up on the recommendation of our August 2013 study concerning the bilingual capacity of the Superior Court judiciary. On a related note, we are organizing a conference on access to justice with the Bar of Montreal. Our third program activity, Internal Services, allows the Office of the Commissioner to assemble resources that support the organization as a whole, including asset management, finance, and human resources management. This activity has been allocated a budget of $7.4 million, which constitutes 35.7% of our total budget. These services, essential to any organization, ensure that taxpayers' dollars are used efficiently and transparently. En plus de prendre les dernières dispositions.
In addition to completing the logistical and administrative arrangements associated with the recent move to Gatineau, we will explore opportunities for further collaboration with other agents of Parliament on the delivery of the Office of the Commissioner's internal services, while upholding our mandate and maintaining our independence. We will also migrate to the Government of Canada's PeopleSoft Human Resources Information System, harmonize our employee performance management program with the Treasury Board Secretariat's new directive on performance management, and implement the shared case management solution for small departments and agencies. Lastly, we will develop additional technological tools to improve efficiency and employee workflow.
Thank you for your attention. I'd be pleased to discuss any aspect of our operations in more detail.
Merci, Monsieur Fraser. Monsieur Godin.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser. Mr. Godin. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Fraser, Ms. Lagacé, and Ms. Sekali. I would like to welcome all of you to the Official Languages Committee. I will start right away because we have a limited amount of time. I'd like to know if, Mr. Commissioner, you support you supported the bill for the appointment of bilingual Supreme Court judges. You've supported it through the process. I've tabled it 3 times in the House of Commons. Are you disappointed with the results of last night? Well, I'm always disappointed when a bill that I support is defeated. But that having been said, I try to approach these challenges without getting emotionally involved. I believe that the principle of bilingualism among Supreme Court judges, it's a fundamental principle that I support. Commissioner, I would invite you to go and watch CPAC from last night. We were in the House of Commons, just to give you an example. I asked questions to the Minister Lisa Raitt on Via Rail, and the first question that I asked, I had to repeat it 3 times because she didn't understand the translation. So I said, well, welcome to the Supreme Court of Canada. So I would invite all Canadians to go and watch that clip, and you will see what happens when the Francophone community tries to speak out. And it's disappointing that the Prime Minister doesn't want bilingual Supreme Court judges. Linguistic equality, how far does that go? The federal court is bilingual, and the Federal Court of Appeal as well. You can appear and hear your case in the language of your choice. And I'm disappointed, and maybe I get emotional about it because both official languages are very, very important to me. I'm disappointed that there are people who appear before the Supreme Court and cannot be understood in their own language. So I have another important question in this area. It's something that bothered me in the past. It still bothers me today. And that's the move of your office. It's something you spoke about earlier, Mr. Fraser. In your new office, you share offices with the Ethics Commissioner with Elections Canada. The impartiality of your... When people work in the same office, when they have responsibilities as agent of Parliament, is there not a danger? You're going to tell me there isn't a danger because you've accepted this move, but I'm always concerned when I see so many people working together because you have to be responsible for example, auditing the Ethics Commissioner. And the Ethics Commissioner might wish to audit or investigate the official languages in the Commissariat. And yes, maybe you're saving some money, but does this not endanger the impartiality of agents of Parliament? Well, Mr. Chair, I don't believe so. And if I thought that there was a danger, then I would not have taken the decision that I did to undertake this move. As agents of Parliament, we are often in situations where we discuss certain points. We agree on many points. For example, several years ago, we all came together and signed a common position for the Treasury Board Secretariat. We signed a letter concerning Bill C-520. So there are a number of things that affect all of us as agents of Parliament. However, that does not prevent one agent of Parliament from investigating another. The Auditor General, for example, undertakes audits of all of us every year, and just because we're agents of Parliament, it doesn't take less time. The audits are just as rigorous as for any other organization. And it's exactly the same thing if we're called upon to investigate a case that applies to other agents of Parliament. And just to add to that, there's now a legal obligation for all agents of Parliament to be bilingual at the time of their appointment. And so for me, that was reassuring when it comes to the leadership of these organizations. They can be ensured that from the time of appointment, all agents of Parliament will understand the issue of linguistic duality. Well, maybe for the Supreme Court, it'll be for another time. You talked about Bill C-520, and I'm sure some of my colleagues will ask some questions on that. That's concerning the impartiality of agents of Parliament, which is very important. But I'd like to turn now to CBC, the cuts at CBC Radio-Canada. You know, we had Hubert Lacroix before the committee last week, and Radio-Canada saw cuts of $115 million. The minister's saying, oh, no, it's we're not cutting. Millions and millions of dollars have been cut from Radio-Canada if you take inflation into account. CBC Radio-Canada is a public institution, and in minority regions, in Moncton, for example, if you had two journalists working for RDI and you cut one of them, that's a 50% cut to journalism. How will this not affect... how can this not affect Radio-Canada's mandate to support minority communities in this country? What are your thoughts? Well, I am concerned with the impact that these cuts could have on Radio-Canada's capacity to continue serving official language minority communities. Parliamentarians, citizens, and audience members in the majority often have a hard time understanding to what extent Radio-Canada plays an essential role in the lives of those who live in minority language communities, be they Anglophones living in Sept-Îles, Francophones in Saskatoon or in Moncton, or often it's the only source of information, both on both television and on radio. And for communities, for families who want to ensure that their children continue to have access to being able to live in French outside of Quebec or in English in some of the regions outside of Montreal, well, that's always a challenge. It's a challenge that I've lived myself as the father of a family living in Quebec. And I can say that the role of CBC Radio-Canada in minority communities, well, it's a very, very important role that they play. Thank you. Mr. Gould. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Fraser, Ms. Sekali, and Madame Legacy for being here. Mr. Fraser, you've always promoted exchanges between different communities in Canada. You've always promoted people moving from one region to another to live a linguistic experience. Right now in Canada we have some problems with the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. We know that there are labor shortages in certain places, and Canadian businesses are putting a lot of energy into finding people in other countries to replace, to find people to fill these jobs, which are often seasonal, often summer jobs. Would there be a way to take young Canadians from aged 18 to 25 from one region, move them to another, allow them to work for 4 months, be housed somewhere, and have that linguistic experience? Because I'm sure that we could find 100,000 young people in this country who'd be tempted to live that experience for maybe a few months, a couple of times in their lives, and I think that would be an advantage to them and to Canada.
I think it's a very interesting idea. My own experience, well, due to my own experience, I actually learned French through summer jobs. They weren't necessarily exchange programs, but these were periods of 3 or 4 months where I was immersed in French in Quebec. I had Francophone colleagues who also learned English through summer jobs when they were in university. And what I've noticed is that under the current exchange system, it's easier for an Ontario teacher to arrange an exchange with a teacher in Australia, or to have a job exchange where the students live with each other's families. It's much easier to do that internationally than it is to do it with Quebec. And it's much easier for a Quebec teacher to arrange an exchange with a teacher in France than with one in Ontario. So I think that there are a lot of paths that we could explore, a lot of opportunities that could be arranged with that approach. Young Canadians today, it seems, are really making an effort to learn the other official languages. Francophones learning English and Anglophones learning French. But the problem is when they get to the job market, they work for 2 or 3 years in their area. Often they're working in a unilingual environment and they slowly lose the second language. So would it be possible to do a similar pairing program with young Canadians working in companies? If those companies have offices in other provinces, perhaps they could do exchange programs for a few months. In that way, young people would be able to maintain their language skills in the other official language. Well, In the private sector and also in the public sector, it might happen. I remember at one point I read a report from Heritage Canada concerning their efforts to promote the learning of the other official language. And they set up an exchange program for their employees. So an employee from an Anglophone area could do an exchange with an employee in a Francophone area. And I thought that was such a great idea. But then on the next page of the report, they said that they had done this program with exactly 2 employees. So when these things are done on such a small scale, they don't have the same impact that a much larger scale program could have. And I think that in the public sector, it should be possible to work with young people's careers so that they could have these types of experiences. I think that the Farm Funding Program for Canada have done exchange programs like this. And I think it would be good to look at this as a model. It could serve as an example for ways of promoting official languages. In Quebec, I met people who came from other provinces, and I also know Quebecers who spent 2 or 3 years traveling through other offices in other provinces, and it really strengthens these relationships within Canada, and these people serve as ambassadors. I've met a lot of public servants who have applied for positions in other parts of Canada, seeing this as an adventure. And they have had a wide range of experiences throughout the country. But as far as I know, it's always up to the employee to take the initiative. I don't know if there are any programs that really encourage that type of exchange. And if such programs exist, they're often not very well known. It might be a good idea for you to take a leadership position on this and to set an example and to inspire other departments and even private companies across the country to do the same thing. And those are all the questions that I have. Thank you. Thank you, Madame Saint-Denis. Good morning. Thank you for being here. I'd like to come back to the budget. Some official languages budgets are sent to federal departments. Wouldn't it be more effective and more efficient to deal with the budget within your department? Because we don't always know what's being done with the budgets. Well, this has to do with the transformation of the Commissioner's office's role. For example, if we changed the role of the Commissioner into one of a centralized agency, an agency responsible for managing official languages within the government, and if we took people from the Treasury Board, Heritage Canada, and other departments, that would fundamentally change our role as an ombudsman and as an officer of Parliament. It would really transform us into a centralized agency. But wouldn't that be a more effective way of defending minority rights, Francophone and Anglophone minority rights? Well, I think that would be a very different approach, maybe an interesting one, but I don't really want to venture out and discuss whether that would be more effective. I'm sure that there are some aspects where it would be easier to track spending. Currently, it's quite difficult to know how much language training costs, because now it's a responsibility of each independent department. Language training programs are part of individual public servants' training plans. So when there are 260 federal institutions, it's very difficult for us to know exactly how much it costs, even for the Auditor General. If parliamentarians decided that they wanted to transform and change the current situation, or that they wanted to create a central agency within the government, they could, but that would change our role as an ombudsman, as an officer of parliament, as an investigator of complaints at official languages. In your presentation, in the part where you discussed the protection of language rights, you mentioned many things: investigations, audits, and so on. And if you go before the courts, what is the part of that 36% of the budget that is dedicated to appearances before the courts? Well, I think I will ask Ms. Lagacé to answer that question. Good morning. Well, it's difficult to say because each investigation is separate. Every department has its own legal services department, and legal services represents around 8 and 10% of our total budget. So between 800,000 and 1 million. And we have 8 lawyers. As for the cost of court appearances or court actions, it's often difficult to know in advance how often we're going to have such actions or how much a given case will cost. It's often less expensive for us to support a case rather than to go before the courts ourselves. If we are leading the legal fight, it's more expensive. So we always conduct a strategic assessment to know when we should intervene, how long we should wait to see if a case goes before the Supreme Court, for example, or before a federal court. All of those things are taken into consideration. So we need to do an estimate every year of the costs that could be involved. What are the rules concerning the census? What is the impact of the number of people in Francophone minority communities? Do the new census rules have an impact on how we identify these minority Francophone communities? Well, if you'll allow me, I would rather answer that question during the second hour when we talk about economic consequences for communities. I know that one of my colleagues who will be appearing in the second hour has studied that question more closely. I know that there are small communities where it's difficult to get precise data, but I can't tell you exactly what the impact is, since we're actually talking about information that we don't have. Okay, one more question. Does the Commissioner believe that the federal government has a historic responsibility concerning the disappearance of French in certain communities, given all of the anti-French laws that existed in history? Is that something that's taken into account? Yes. And I think that that is an explanation for the royal inquest into bilingualism in the 60s, the Official Languages Act, which was the result of the Commission's recommendation, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which clearly established the rights under the Linguistic Charter. And then, of course, there were a whole series of Supreme Court decisions that clearly established that there was a need to compensate for the damage inflicted by these laws over the period of a century. So there is a desire and a will to compensate for that damage. And that's reflected in the laws, the creation of the Charter, and the decisions of the Supreme Court. After the French language education system, well, after all of these decisions, not only were some French schools re-established in every province, there were also French language school boards established in those different provinces. So I'm convinced that since 1982, we've been able to see that these communities have flourished thanks to the creation of those schools and school boards. And there's also the support of some federal government programs in those communities. For example, the Association of French-speaking lawyers. Such an association exists in almost every province. Not every single one. I believe PEI does not have such an association, but all of these things show that there is a need and a desire to remedy the deplorable situation that existed before. Thank you. Ms. Bateman.
And a special welcome to Madame Lagacé pour la première fois ici, je pense.
It's your first time here, I think.
Some very specific questions, just because I want to understand how these documents work. And thanks to our wonderful analyst, Lucie Lecomte, we have great little tables provided to us on the protection of, for example, your three key pillars: the linguistic rights protection, the linguistic duality promotion, and then, of course, internal services. And I'm just referencing your report on plans and priorities, and I see in the back, and maybe you can help me with this. I see in the back the analysis of the full-time equivalents relative to each of those three pillars. And, you know, it occurs to me you're in the business of providing a very important professional service, not only to Parliament but to Canada, and professional services are always human intensive. And the full-time equivalents, you've got 63, 59, 48 in that order. You've got the highest cost, the highest cost for internal services with the lowest FTE. And that doesn't usually make sense because you guys are always in the business of providing professional services. So I just want to understand that, if I could. What accounts for that difference?
Well, let me give you a partial answer, and I'll ask Madame Lagacé to provide more of the details. There are certain elements in internal services, this internal service costs, that I think are a bit deceptive. For example, all of the costs of my office, my travel costs, are defined as part of internal services, and similarly, the there are
travel worth like it's 2 million more than I mean you're basically talking about 21 million. So you'd think if it was even, it would be 777. It's 668, and that's just ballpark with rounding. And I'm just curious if you can't travel that much. I just
but there are other elements. For example, costs which might, with a different accounting system, be allocated to each branch are covered by internal services. So all of the telephone costs, some of the rental costs of our regional offices.
But Mr. Fraser, you just said that they would be allocated to each department.
Yeah, but they are not now. Now all of those costs are included as internal services.
Them all included. Okay.
But if I'll ask Madame Lagacé to give you a more detailed explanation than that one.
Because, you know, usually the human cost is the most expensive component in providing anything like this. And it's just such a material difference. Kind of makes me, once an auditor, always an auditor. Eh?
Bonjour.
Good morning. The Treasury Board rules, the current rules, require us to include cabinet, to include the reallocation of funds following the 2012 budget. Following that budget, we made some efforts, and those costs represent around 2.9 million, and that's included in the 4.7 million. So the real cost of internal services is actually 4.5 million, or around 24% of the Commission's total budget. We approached the Treasury Board to have discussions with them and to share our concerns with them. And our colleagues are working on this and are making more efforts. So the next time we present these figures to you, the rules may have been changed, thanks to our Treasury Board colleagues, because currently we are respecting Treasury Board's rules, but they're giving, the result is these figures that are not completely accurate. Okay, thank you. The second question.
This one, I don't understand why this would be the case. In the analysis that we have from Lucie Lecomte, from the Library of Parliament, and it's pulled from the main estimates and it's pulled from your documentation, Commissioner, it's yours, Commissioner. And it shows the full-time equivalents by fiscal year, and it's quite precise, and you know, it starts in 2008 and goes to 2012-13, and it has 159 full-time equivalents. And yet, in the report on plans and priorities, if you add them up, it actually works out to 170. And in fact, you have it summarized in the, that's if you add them up in the part 2, the section 2, the analysis of programs by strategic outcome, it's 170, and you also have that summarized further up on page 9, actually, of the report on plans and priorities. So I'm just curious, that's you're reporting, I mean, there's 11 full-time, now, I mean, obviously, maybe you're not filling everything, but that's, again, a material difference, and I'm just, what does that relate to?
Let me take a stab at this, and then Madame Lagacé can correct me or amplify what I have to say. As I understand it, we have an authorization for full-time equivalents of 177. We are now about 170. One of the problems of giving that it becomes such a rolling number is that, and one of the challenges in matching our forecasting to the final results is that it always takes longer to fill positions than is predicted. So at any given time, there are a certain number of vacant positions. And one of the, when we did an A-based review, there was a recommendation that we hire some additional create some additional positions to deal with the backlog. And we initially did this with, or attempted to do this with what's called determinate positions, meaning people would not have guarantee of a permanent full-time job in the public service. And it proved to be very difficult to attract people for these. We have now made the decision to make some of those positions permanent so that we have a better chance of actually filling those positions. But it's a
decision fit with your A-based review decision or discussions, which clearly said and recommended to you and your executive hire part-time so you aren't I don't want to say saddled with the burden in perpetuity, but that's basically what your decision would have been. I mean, they were recommending.
It always becomes a question of how can you match the needs that we have with the organization with the money that we have available, and so there are sometimes quite detailed conversations.
Did you have another review process to change from the determination that was done in your A-based review process?
We completed the recommendations of the A-based review process. There is a continuing process of internal audits that take place from the recommendations of the Audit and Evaluation Committee, who look very carefully at our operations.
What's your process for integrating that internal, the continual improvement potential of internal audit processes into the reality of managing the operation?
How do we do that?
What is your process? Yeah, how do you do that?
Well, there is a risk-based audit process. There is a risk-based evaluation. There is a plan of internal audits over the next few years in which we decide.
The question is, how do you, like everyone, like we've instituted that throughout the Public Service of Canada, and it's a very, very good thing. How departments integrate that information into a process of continual improvement is quite another question, and I'm curious how you do that.
Okay, thank you, Madam Bateman. Mr. Fraser?
Just quick.
Mr. Fraser?
So, it becomes part of our management process. We have senior managers who regularly appear with the Audit and Evaluation Committee. When there are audits and evaluations, there is a management response. Those become integrated into our proceedings. We've been very fortunate with the outside members who are part of our Audit and Evaluation Committee. So there's a kind of ongoing discussion. I treat them really as if they were my board of directors, and so there's an ongoing dialogue with those external experts that I found it almost a quarterly seminar on governance that's been very valuable for me.
Excellent.
Thank you. Mr. Chisu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Fraser and Mr. Secretary and Ms. Lagasse for being here, and thank you very much for your presentation. I will start with a very small question. In your presentation, you explained that the Office of the Commissioner has a budget of 20.8 million to carry out its mandate, and this amount includes 13 million in salary, or 62% of your budget. So now, when you are speaking about the activities, so protection of the linguistic rights, promotion of linguistic duality, internal services. So when I'm making the addition, so you are taking out the services, I think that it is, I don't explain the numbers. So are you including the salaries in this protection of, for example, in the protection of linguistic duality, you are including the salaries of people there? Or what is the percentage of the salaries or which are part of each of the three main programs that you are developing? Because, on one side is this one, 62%, they are all salaries, and you have some programs to develop. So how you are doing it? Because if you are adding the numbers, that is not matching somehow.
Yes, salary numbers are included, so but when we start looking at specific activities, for example, one of the things that we try to do in analyzing our numbers is to work out how much does it actually cost to do an investigation? And we calculated that it cost roughly $2,000 for a formal investigation and roughly $700 for an informal investigation. But that doesn't take, that is really just the time cost of the employee, the average length of time that an employee spends on that, and so it's a calculation of that salary cost. That doesn't take into account the legal consultation that will take place with our legal people or the various other operational costs that are. And so it can sometimes be difficult to, for me at any rate, to sort through the figures. But again, I'll ask Madame Lagacé to give you a more detailed answer from the accountant's vantage point.
You know, I know a lot of innovative accounting and so on. I'm an engineer, so when I'm looking at the numbers, I would like to have some explanation for the numbers. It's nice to have percentages, it's nice to have numbers, but you need to see behind the numbers and to know what is going on really.
Before I pass the microphone to Madame Lagacé, let me point out that I am neither an accountant nor an engineer, and that thanks to Madame Lagacé's very careful management of our finances, we have had 10 consecutive unreserved opinions from the Auditor General. So I will pass the microphone to the person who understands the numbers much better than I do.
Just to understand things, nothing wrong with it.
Okay, Madame Lagacé.
Bon, bonjour. Écoutez.
Good morning. We have a budget of $20.8 million, and of that, there are $18 million for salaries and operations. There are $2 million for social benefits, and the Commissioner's Office has no authority over that. That's decided by the Treasury Board Secretariat, which negotiates the collective agreements. So those $2 million, we can't touch them. So we receive it and we pay it out. We put it into the pension fund. So of the $18.6 million that we manage on a day-to-day basis, there's $13 million for salaries and $5 million for the operations budget. Of the operating budget of $5 million, within that, we've made the commitment with the 2012 federal budget to fund internally a project. This was our contribution to the government's efforts for GITI. We asked for funds from the Treasury Board Secretariat, and we determined we would need to make an effort, and so internally we funded that project, which leaves us with roughly $4 million in other funds to pay for rent, telephones, etc., the other expenses that we have. So if you add everything up, $6 million, etc., then you come to $18 million. Thank you. Mr. Nichols. Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, you identified as one of your priorities justice as a strategic priority. I believe it's been 9 months since you published your study on access to justice. What answer have you received from Minister MacKay on this important issue? Well, there was an informal response to the extent that I gave him notice before the tabling of that study, before the at the Canadian Bar Association meeting in August in Saskatoon last year, and when he was asked questions in Saskatoon, he seemed to react in a positive manner, but in a relatively informal context. A question and answer period in public. Formally, we have not received a response, and we have had no indications that our recommendations have been followed, that an agreement will be developed with the provincial prosecutors. So we're still waiting for a formal response. We've been told that the implications of our recommendations are being studied, but there has been no formal response to date. Did they give you any idea of when there might be a formal response from the minister? No, not to the best of my knowledge. Out of curiosity, in your office you have how many employees in your office? 170. 170. But as I said, from one day to another, it's often difficult to have an exact number because there are always people coming and going. There are some positions that have not been filled. There are those who are retiring. There are others who have been promoted. But more or less 170 employees. But it's easy for me as an MP to understand why you have the expenses you do, because we have 4 or 5 employees in our offices, and there are some members around this table who spend $420,000 a year for an office of 4 people. So it makes sense when you see that there are 170 employees in your office.
Your mandate of promotion of linguistic duality, which is nearly 1/3 of your budget. My colleague, Monsieur Godin, mentioned Radio-Canada, and we're very concerned about the CBC cuts and CBC's mandate also to help you promote linguistic duality. Monsieur Lacroix mentioned that the revenue shortfall might put his mandate or the CBC's mandate in jeopardy, and that there should be a national dialogue about this with Canadians. Would you be willing to participate in that dialogue with Monsieur Lacroix to discuss the CBC's role in promoting linguistic duality?
Absolutely. I have in the past, both before parliamentary committees and in op-ed pieces in newspapers, and a few minutes ago talked about the importance of the role that CBC and Radio-Canada play for minority language communities, and it's a role that is often either ignored or misunderstood by people who are in a linguistic majority situation where they are able to see CBC or Radio-Canada as just one post, one station on the dial of maybe 100, 150 stations. But if you are living in an isolated community, the Radio-Canada station, if you were in, outside Quebec, or the English language community stations that CBC provides in Quebec, are a critical lifeline for the vitality of those communities. And I am full of admiration for the role that CBC reporters, journalists, hosts play in those minority communities, where they often go above and beyond the role of simply reading the news and hosting a morning show, but playing a critical community animation role.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll now go to, we actually have about, we'll have about 5 minutes left. We'll lastly go to Mr. Daniel.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Obviously, there are a lot of things happening in the minority community and linguistic groups around the country. And I really just wanted to ask you how the programs like the Development of Official Languages Communities program, some $220 million a year, and the Enhancement of Official Languages program, another $112 million per year, from the Department of Canada of Canadian Heritage, support the economies of minority linguistic communities?
I think that they play a very important role, and it is They support a whole series of community organizations which in some cases play a critical role not only in the active support of the existing community, but in bringing people back to those communities. I'm thinking of the community organization for Anglophones in the Madeline Islands, for example, where by working with some of the French language community organizations, they have created a sufficient vitality and energy and economic activity that they've attracted young people who have gone away to go to university to come back to the island. And the same, I found the same thing in the Gaspé, where there were people who had gone away for post-secondary institutions, in some cases gone away to the armed forces, and reaching a stage in their lives where they wanted to raise their children and move back home. And that decision was influenced significantly by the community vitality and the organizations that are being supported by these programs.
Do you have any say in how that money is being spent? By you, I mean your department. You know.
So I'm not in the. I'm in the influence business. We do investigations. We also will provide advice to institutions. Part of the obligations under the Act are that federal institutions have to take positive measures for the growth and development of minority language communities, and I will sometimes informally have meetings with executive committees of departments to encourage them to consult more closely with minority language communities, and on a more formal basis, if there is a decision that's been made in which complaints have been laid, we do investigations, and we will make recommendations as to how the department should better meet its responsibilities under Part 7 of the Act. So, but I do not have a formal role in deciding how Canadian Heritage is going to spend money. But sometimes informally, if a community organization will talk to me, and I have informal conversations with people in departments and will flag some of my worries. Okay. So there are informal dialogues that go on.
Okay. How do we evaluate socioeconomic situation of minority linguistic communities? Should we speak about the economic situation of individuals living in minority linguistic communities? Is the economic situation for minority linguistic communities different than the regional and national economic situation? What do you think?
It becomes a fine line. I think that these certainly I am aware that it is. It is difficult to use Part 7 of the Official Languages Act as a sweeping measure to stop elements that are affecting a community as a whole. So, for example, if a mill shuts down in a New Brunswick town, and this has an effect on the entire community, it's difficult to use the provisions of the Official Languages Act to intervene in that situation. That having been said, I think that it is it is important that the members of minority language communities are able to thrive economically in their community, and we have seen with the activities of the Réseau de Développement Économique et Employabilité that there are a whole series of ways in which by linking support for industrial activities or for tourism activities, that there is a strong link between supporting small businesses in the tourism industry that offer services in both languages, that this has an impact on the economic vitality of the community as a whole by supporting the minority language businesses in that area.
Thank you very much. So our questioning of the Commissioner has ended, and the Chair calls vote 1 under the Office of Official, the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages for the amount of $18,623,744. Shall vote 1 carry? Yes. Vote 1 has carried, and shall the Chair report this back to the House? The Chair shall report it back to the House. Thank you very much for your questions and comments. Now, is it the wish of the committee to continue to the second part of the orders of the day, which is the study on the economic vitality of linguistic minority communities, or do you wish to suspend for 5 minutes for a health break? 5 minutes? 5. Do you wish to suspend for 5 minutes just for...
No, let's continue.
Or do you want to continue?
Let's continue.
On continue.
Faut que Charles est témoin.
So, what's the consensus here?
I think we should continue, Chair.
Okay, well, okay, we'll suspend for 5 minutes.
C'est ça.
On continue avec notre séance.
We will resume this meeting of the Official Languages Committee. For the second part of the committee, we will be looking at, pursuant to Standing Order 108.3, we will be pursuing our study of the economic situation of Canada's minority linguistic communities. And in this second part, we have 4 witnesses, Mr. Fraser, Mr. Giguère, Mr. Loriot, and Mr. Quell. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Fraser, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, honourable members of the committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you about this important issue of economic development in official language minority communities.
Yet one that's been studied very little. As the community representatives who have appeared before you have mentioned, the lack of research and data is a serious hindrance to understanding the issue and developing effective solutions. I'm therefore pleased the committee is studying the matter, and I hope others will follow suit. As some have said in recent weeks, there are economic development opportunities on the horizon for official language minority communities, whether in international trade, economic immigration, or other areas for entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized businesses. During my meetings around the country, I've noted considerable potential within official language communities in many regions in terms of entrepreneurship, economic development, and creativity. To develop this potential and seize the opportunities, English and French-speaking minority communities must nonetheless have the right tools and resources. Au début de mon mandat, j'ai amorcé une série.
At the start of my mandate, I launched a series of studies on the vitality of official language minority communities in several regions of the country. The studies involved various partners and found that, despite similarities, each community faces a different reality. Beyond their challenges, communities each have their own aspirations that motivate them to grow. While the economic situation of minority Anglophones and Francophones in different parts of the country is now comparable to that of the majority, the situation varies greatly from one region to another, and minority communities continue to face major challenges. The people who have appeared before your committee expressed it well. Each region and each community is unique, and while best practices can be found in many communities, there is no single recipe for success.
The demand for labour is high, and workers are therefore pouring in from other regions of Canada and abroad. French-speaking communities in this part of the country therefore require more resources to meet an increasing demand in services and community support. In some regions of the Maritimes and North and Southwestern Ontario, on the other hand, a challenging economy sees young people leaving for large urban centres, which threatens their community's future and entrepreneurship. In Quebec, young English speakers have difficulty accessing the job market and are underemployed. They're leaving the province to settle elsewhere, which is undermining community vitality and renewal. Federal institutions must therefore remain attentive and take these differences into account when creating programs and policies to support economic development and labour market integration. The institutions must also be flexible. In the minority context, the implementation of positive measures does not always involve wide-reaching action. Sometimes small steps make a big difference to a community's growth and development. N'oublions pas que l'emploi.
We must remember that employment, education, and immigration are jurisdictions that are shared with provincial and territorial governments. In transferring its programs and funds to the provinces and territories, the federal government must ensure that the provincial and territorial governments are aware of the needs of official language communities and the requirement to consult these communities to fully understand their unique challenges. In this sense, bilateral agreements must contain solid language clauses and accountability mechanisms to ensure that the needs of these communities are taken into account. A healthy economy, job opportunities, the presence of employers and entrepreneurs, and opportunities for growth can all have a positive impact on a community's ability to stay dynamic, to encourage its young people to remain, and to attract new workers and new members. We should remember that when a community organizes a tourism project, hosts an event, creates a cultural product, or develops a cooperative, its appeal goes well beyond the community itself.
Communities have targeted immigration as a solution for the future, a means of ensuring their growth. In recent years, the federal government has been working to modernize the Canadian immigration system with a focus on the economy, faster workforce integration, and the recruitment of immigrants with skills needed in Canada. The new system gives priority to the economy and the role of employers. In this context, French-speaking minority communities should be promoted as privileged partners and a significant asset in attracting and retaining newcomers. Whether for the French language services and resources they have to offer, the infrastructure available to them, or their expertise, these communities are well placed to support employers, immigrants, and their families. It is therefore essential that they have the tools required to build bridges with Anglophone and Francophone employers and with the provinces in order to make the most of the new immigration system. De près ou de loin, plusieurs secteurs touchent au développement.
Both directly and indirectly, many sectors have an impact on economic development, such as arts and culture, education, and immigration. Cooperation among the various sectors and stakeholders and promotion of everyone's areas of expertise are key to the accomplishment and success of many community projects. Representatives from various sectors and federal institutions must work together toward community growth, each bringing their own skills. On that note, Mr. Chair, I will conclude by thanking you and the members of the committee for the work they have put into carrying out this study, which I will read with attention. Thank you. Mr. Nichols. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Fraser, many witnesses appeared before our committee and mentioned that despite the growing effectiveness within their organizations, the organizations that work with OLMCs do not always have stable and sufficient funding. We have heard that many times. In your opinion, for official language, which tools do official language minority communities need to promote their economic development? Well, I would say that they need to know that the rules are clear, that the government rules are clear, and that they understand those rules in a way that allows them to plan for the long term. The funding needs to be there on time. There have been situations in the past where funding for projects was there in the fall, and the money needed to be spent by the 31st of the 31st of March of the next year. So they had a lot of money for that period, but then there was a shortfall between March and October, or even November and December. And during that, so in those cases, they had to act very quickly. And often they had to hire staff in areas where it was very difficult to find qualified people. So they would have to go to big, large urban centers to find people with the necessary expertise. And that actually further undermined the economic vitality of the local community, when they could have been using those funds to support the community. But they were forced to go to large urban centers to find staff. Things have improved since then. I think that 25% of the funding does arrive as soon as the documents are signed, so that is an improvement. But even recently, I have heard that there are delays in certain programs that are affecting some of these agencies.
Roadmap programs not receiving the funding on time, and it really does hamper the ability of these organizations to provide the services and also the security of the organization itself. I'd like to go on to the question of the arts and culture sector and its importance to both minority language communities. We see cuts at CBC lately. In English Canada, Lyndon McIntyre, for instance, has just resigned in order to save the position of a younger employees at CBC. I've heard Lyndon speak at Storyfest in Hudson, in my riding, on his book, The Bishop's Man, and we're losing really amazing people in the arts and culture sector and in the CBC due to the lack of vision of the government currently, cutting off the funding for CBC and Radio-Canada. And we're starting to hear from French services, from Radio-Canada, the people providing the service are actually speaking up. And I'm mentioning it to you because it's been mentioned that the English services, the people working there, are reticent about speaking up and making this a political issue. But I can testify that as an Anglo-Quebecer, that all the services that are produced in English Canada are consumed in Quebec on English CBC, and the same is true for French Canada. In minority communities in French Canada consume the services that are produced in Quebec for them. And so, though these cuts are being made, do you think that this will make it more difficult to get a quality service in minority communities?
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Mr. Fraser.
I think there are two elements to keep in mind. One is the challenge that families living in a minority situation have in continuing to keep that language alive for themselves and for their children. And if you are living in Toronto or in Montreal, you may have 150 channels in your language. If you are living in Baie-Comeau or in Saskatoon, you are very dependent on CBC or Radio-Canada. And so there is it is very important that that service that is available is a service of quality. The other element is the degree to which it is going to be possible for CBC and Radio-Canada to maintain the network that now exists of services in those minority communities. I'm thinking of the English Community Network of the CBC Radio that serves all of the communities off the island of Montreal, which is really one of the few ways in which those communities can hear themselves reflected on the radio. And if you go to Saint Boniface or to Regina or to other centers, it becomes clear that those local programs are just a critical forum for the community to learn about itself, to communicate with other members of the community, and they are absolutely critical. And you can't take that amount of money out of the system without having an impact as to what is going to be produced.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Fraser, good morning. It's good to see you and your colleagues ici. Bonjour à tous. This is not where I wanted to go, but how much money was taken out of the CBC budget by the Government of Canada? They receive $1.1 billion a year, and the head of the CBC has been in recently to say the loss of hockey has been problematic, but as well the problem of producing shows that people just aren't watching and declining viewership.
If you look at public broadcasters around the world, 18 public broadcasters, CBC is 16th in terms of the amount of support that it receives from the public. For many years, the CBC was able to paper over that hole by delivering hockey on the English network, and now that is no longer there as a revenue source, and so it then becomes having stripped away the fig leaf, if you like, that Hockey Night in Canada represented for the CBC in terms of the private sector providing support for public broadcasting. It then becomes a question for the government to say, what is our commitment to public broadcasting? And because there has been, if you like, a natural disaster in terms of, when there is a serious impact, if there's a flood in Calgary, the federal government, by and large, doesn't say, well, Calgary's still getting the same amount of money that it always has for water control from the federal government. They say there's actually a specific crisis here, and what do we think that the citizens of Calgary deserve in terms of response to a particular crisis, and this is a crisis for public broadcasting.
I think that's a fair comment in terms of the impact that the hockey's having, and I concede actually that CBC Radio-Canada does a good job transmitting news, ideas from one part of the country to the other, particularly Radio-Canada as it relates to news in other parts of the country into Quebec. And if my colleagues on the other side ever want to propose that the CBC or Radio-Canada, instead of cutting jobs in the regions, start with the national capital, this is in Ottawa, I'd be happy to support that. For example, when the Liberals cut program spending in the mid-1990s, they cut the regions before they cut Ottawa. So Mr. Godin's not here today, but if it meant moving a job from Ottawa to Moncton, for example, I'd support him on that. But I actually want to kind of come back to an issue that you've talked to me about before, and others. I know it's one you're interested in, perhaps even passionate, which is something Mr. Godin brought up earlier, and that is the question of bilingual Supreme Court judges, which I know you support. I do not. Let's not get into a discussion on the issue. But I'm curious to know, in light of the recent Supreme Court decision on the Senate and amending the Senate, making changes to the Senate, whereby the Supreme Court ruled that the federal Parliament could not make a unilateral change to the makeup of the Senate, would you concede that to make this change, that of a bilingual, with reference to with reference to the Senate, that to make a change to the bilingual judges, the Supreme Court's judges, as a federal institution, this would require the consent of the provinces. We don't need to get into if it's 7 of 10 or unanimous number of provinces, but that provincial consent would be required to change the makeup of the court, so judges had to be bilingual in order to be appointed.
I have not had a legal opinion on the impact of the government's reference on the Senate case, but I think that there are, and my sense from the coverage in La Presse this morning is that there is a substantial legal debate underway as to would this represent a significant change to the makeup of to the nomination process. One of the things that I would, looking at the fundamental principles, and let me stress, I am not a lawyer, so I would await clearer legal decisions on or legal advice on this before making a. But if you look at the Official Languages Act and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the clear statement that French and English have equal status in this country, and you look at the degree to which various Supreme Court decisions have been made to repair damage done in the past so as to ensure equal status, I think you could make the argument that there is an obligation to ensure that there is equal status, and there are certainly, we have heard, and you have heard, a series of complaints that equality is not now the case before the courts, and I've certainly made the before the Supreme Court, and I've given a number of examples in the past of how that equality. Now, when the Official Languages Act was being amended in 1988, the Minister of Justice at the time, Ramon Natition, was asked about the fact that there was a specific exemption for the Supreme Court, and he said that he didn't think that there was at that point sufficient pool of judges to allow that exemption to be removed, but that this would be something that could be examined in the future, which, to my mind, if you were looking at the intention of the legislator, was an indication that this was at the point that the Official Languages Act was amended, certainly did not exclude the idea that this requirement could be introduced in the future. So I think there are, the Parliament has voted last night on one approach, but I think that there are other approaches that could be examined that would not necessarily involve a constitutional amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fraser and Mr. Williamson. Now, the bells are ringing for votes, and votes will take place in 20 minutes. The committee has two options. We can adjourn immediately, so you can get down the hall to the votes, or we could continue for another 10 minutes. What would the committee like to do?
10 minutes.
10. You're 10 minutes? I hear okay. Then, because there's no consensus, we'll adjourn. I want to thank Mr. Fraser and the other members of the Office of the Commissioner of Official Languages for your appearance in front of our committee today, both on the estimates and on our study, although I think we tangentially touched on the study in our questions and comments. But I appreciate everyone's questions and comments, and without further ado, this meeting is adjourned.